Welcome to Chapter 6, The Power of Awareness, Attention. A double-minded man is unstable in all of his ways. James chapter 1 and verse 8. Attention is forceful in proportion to the narrowness of its focus, that is, when it is obsessed with a single idea or sensation. It is steadied and powerfully focused only by such an adjustment of the mind as permits you to see only one thing only, for you steady the attention and increase its power by confining it. The desire which realizes itself is always a desire upon which attention is exclusively concentrated, for an idea is endowed with power only in proportion to the degree of attention fixed on it. Concentrated observation is the attentive attitude directed from some specific end. The attentive attitude involves selection, for when you pay attention, it signifies that you have decided to focus your attention on one object or state rather than another. Therefore, when you know what you want, you must deliberately focus your attention on the feeling of your wish fulfilled until that feeling fills the mind and crowds all other ideas out of consciousness. The power of attention is the measure of your inner force. Concentrated observation of one thing shuts out other things and causes them to disappear. The great secret of success is to focus the attention on the feeling of the wish fulfilled without permitting any distraction. All progress depends upon an increase of attention. The ideas which impel you to action are those which dominate the consciousness, those which possess the attention. The idea which excludes all others from the field of attention discharges in action. This one thing I do, forgetting those things that are behind, I press forward toward the mark. Philippians chapter 3. This means this one thing you can do, forgetting those things that are behind, you can press toward the mark of filling your mind with the feeling of the wish fulfilled. To the unenlightened man, this will seem to be all fantasy, yet all progress comes from those who do not take the abstracted view, nor accept the world as it is. As was stated heretofore, if you can imagine what you please, and if the forms of your thought are as vivid as the forms of nature, you are, by virtue of the power of your imagination, master of your fate. Your imagination is you yourself, and the world as your imagination sees it is the real world. When you set out to master the movements of attention, which must be done if you would successfully alter the course of observed events, it is then you realize how little control you exercise over your imagination, and how much it is dominated by sensory impressions and by a drifting on the tides of idle moods. To aid in mastering the control of your attention, practice this exercise. Night after night, just before you drift off to sleep, strive to hold your attention on the activities of the day in reverse order. Focus your attention on the last thing you did, that is, getting into bed, and then move it backward in time over the events until you reach the first event of the day, getting out of bed. This is no easy exercise, but just as specific exercises greatly help in developing specific muscles, this will greatly help in developing the muscle of your attention. Your attention must be developed, must be controlled and concentrated in order to change your concept of yourself successfully and thereby change your future. Imagination is able to do anything, but only according to the internal direction of your attention. If you persist night after night, sooner or later, you will awaken in yourself a center of power and become conscious of your greater self, the real you. Attention is developed by repeated exercise or habit. Through habit, an action becomes easier, and so, in course of time, gives rise to a facility or a faculty, which can then be put to higher use. When you attain control of the internal direction of your attention, you will no longer stand in shallow water, but will launch out into the deep of life. You will walk in the assumption of the wish fulfilled as on a foundation more solid, even, than earth. I love this chapter because it speaks to the disciplinary aspect of manifesting, of creating consciously. We live in a society that is full of distractions, and we're all, for the most part, if you're heavily involved in society, we're all taking part in that, whether it's watching TV or paying attention to the news or getting advertisements in the mail, living in America, if you live in America or any other highly capitalist society, you're bombarded by things that, if not carrying a disciplined mind, will allow you to be drifted away from the things that you're really wanting, right? So the whole thing here is all about focusing attention, because when we focus attention, we focus emotion. And when we focus emotion, we focus vibration. And when we focus vibration, we create reality, right? So attention is forceful in proportion to the narrowness of its focus. So when it's really obsessed with a single idea or sensation, it's steadied and powerfully focused only by such an adjustment that the mind as permits you to see one thing only, right? So the focus here is increasing our ability to be attentive to the feeling of the wish fulfilled, disciplining our attention. And really this is achieved in many different ways. One is mentioned in this chapter, where when you are on your way to sleep at night and you recall the events of the day in backwards order, that's really good. Attention, memory, recalling memory, really, the reason that is so powerful is because what you're doing is you're calling specific thoughts to mind, calling specific emotion, calling specific states to mind when you're recalling events throughout the day. And so naturally, as you do this over and over and over again, and I can attest to this in my own life, because when I first read this, I started doing it, and it wasn't consistent in the beginning, but as I found myself doing it more and more, I found that throughout the day, it was a lot easier for me to call up a scene or call up an emotion or call up a state or force all other ideas out of my head, right? That is when we are consumed by a single idea, feeling the abundance of it, feeling it already being fulfilled. Naturally, any idea that comes to mind will be in alignment with an idea that can be likened to a bridge of incidents. If you read Neville, you understand what that is. When we're living in the wish fulfilled, I really don't ever do anything than focus on taking the action, making the conversation, doing the things that carry that frequency, that resonance, right? So I can sit in my chair, I can sit on my bed, I can do my wish fulfilled, my feel it reels, right? But when it comes to going throughout the day, the greatest way to guarantee your success is to wear the feeling of the wish fulfilled and increase your feeling of the wish fulfilled. And you can only do this through attention exercises, disciplining your attention, right? So when an idea has so much power that it shoves out all other ideas in our mind, we become subject to that. We really do. Everything that we think about focuses and revolves around this single idea, right? So let's just say we've been, we're in the process of manifesting a successful business, right? That allows us to spend a lot of time with our families and do a lot of things like that, and also make really good money. Maybe it's $10,000 a month, maybe it's $100,000 a month, maybe it's $1 million a month. Whatever the case is, what I have found in my experience is that my responsibility and my obligation is to focus my attention on the feeling of the wish fulfilled, absorb myself with the state of being and having the success that I want. And what I find is that throughout the day, throughout my different ventures and things going on, I'm naturally drawn towards those bridges of incidents, right? So encountering the bridge of incidents that leads to the physical manifestation of the thing that was once imagined is really not a multi-part process. It's a single process. And the obligation that you have is to live from that place of carrying that success, of having that abundance, of having that love, of having that, whatever that is, having and being that now, right? What happens here, as we discussed earlier, is everything that we are aware of begins to revolve around that. And the coordinates from which we are viewing that, whether it is not yet having it or having it already, will literally determine the types of ideas that come into our head. The types of ideas and the options that we think we have are totally and completely dependent upon our concept of ourselves, because we can only do what we think we can do. So naturally, every idea or option that comes into our mind as we're contemplating a situation will reach a ceiling, and that ceiling is the extent of our concept, our ideas, our deepest fundamental beliefs about ourselves. And so here, the focus, the obligation you have in going about your day is to increase your ability to be attentive to the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Even for no other reason than to generate more emotional intelligence in your life. One of the biggest reasons we get offended and we want to hurt people and we get angry and upset is because we believe that we have lost something in the midst of adverse circumstance. We believe that a part of ourselves has been threatened by an external sort of thing, and that is just not the truth, because as Neville says here, who we really are is imagination. Who we really are is source, right? And if you go through the source experiments, you'll find that the identity that you've created as a separate human really hinges upon you believing that who you are in your most base state is a human. And the more you begin to question that and really contemplate whether that's true or not, you find that you're really not the body that you're wearing. You are imagination. You are infinite. You are everything that you want to be, simply because who and what you are is the source, the wellspring from which all things that come to be are made, are manifest, right? So you and the thing that you want come from the same exact place, this infinite awareness, this consciousness, right? You come from the same pool of infinity, and it is the perception of separation that keeps you separated from it, right? And what happens when your mind is not, disciplined, when you don't have a disciplined attention, you're going throughout your day and you're, most of the time, if you are not intentionally focused on living from the wish fulfilled, you will inadvertently live from the wish not fulfilled. And you will view the world from that place. Well, that only keeps you separated from the thing that you want. The best thing that you can do is pay attention to the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Pay, right? What happens when you pay? Every thought is an investment. Every feeling is an investment. And we are pulling from the storehouse of the infinity that we are. We are pulling from the storehouse of the divinity that we are, right? The bridge of incidents, the feeling it real, and the physical manifestation are not a multi-part process. They're one process, right? The ideas that impel us to action are those that dominate our consciousness, those which possess the attention, right? So if you're finding it hard to, keep your attention in that place, maybe what you're wanting is not what you really want, right? Maybe it's not what you really want. And who knows? But when you know what you want, you must deliberately focus your attention on the feeling of your wish fulfilled until the feeling fills the mind. Until the feeling fills the mind and crowds all other ideas out of consciousness. Think about a time that you've been, I notice for me, this happens a lot in movie theaters. If I'm going to a movie, I'm totally attentive to what's happening here, and I'm not thinking about nothing else. I'm not thinking about my business. I'm not thinking about, my relationships. I'm not thinking about anything else going in my life. I'm thinking about this movie, right? And we must carry that same attention towards whatever it is that we are wanting to create, right? The feeling of satisfaction around the thing that we're wanting to create should be the dominant feeling that we're carrying every day. And I can guarantee you that if you carry dominantly, meaning 80-90% of your feeling, your true deep feeling, is around the satisfaction of having what you want to have, the manifestation of that is inevitable. It's just inevitable. Because what we carry in the mind turns into the world. It's just the truth. And we find, questioning our own experiences and finding correlations, that everything we are holding in our minds with emotional charges, heavy emotional charges, comes to pass in our world. If you can imagine what you please, and if the forms of your thought are as vivid as the forms of nature, you are, by virtue of the power of your imagination, master of the fate. And when you set out to master the movements of attention, which must be done if you would successfully alter the course of observed events, it is then you realize how little control you exercise over your imagination, and how much it is dominated by sensory impressions and by a drifting on the tides of idle moods, right? Idle moods, when we're not necessarily in intentional states of action, but maybe just hanging out or chilling, right? Even then, we're creating. We're creating even in our most seeming restful moments. In fact, I would venture to say that we're creating even more in those restful moments than we are in the active moments. Okay, so this is the exercise that will really help you strengthen your attention. Night after night, just before you drift off to sleep, strive to hold your attention on the activities of the day in reverse order. Focus your attention on the last thing you did, that is getting into bed, then move it backward in time over the events until you reach the first event of the day, getting out of bed. It's no easy exercise at first, but just as going to the gym, working out, lifting weights greatly helps in developing specific muscles, this will greatly help in developing the muscle of your attention. And so you'll find if you do this night after night after night after night, choosing your state during the day will become easier and easier and easier. Choosing an idea to hold in your mind and crowd all other ideas out of consciousness will be easier and easier and easier and easier. But it's no different than going and lifting weights. We must be consistent and we must be disciplined. It's a choice that we're making every single day to live from the feeling of the wish fulfilled and choose to allow that to penetrate and inebriate our full consciousness. Imagination is able to do anything, but only according to the internal direction of your attention. And if you persist night after night, sooner or later you will awaken in yourself a center of power and become conscious of your greater self, the real you. Attention is developed by repeated exercise or habit, and through habit and action becomes easier, and so in course of time gives rise to a facility or a faculty which can then be put to higher uses. Your job is simple. Consume yourself with the feeling of the wish fulfilled as much as absolutely possible without creating resistance around it. So your job is to bask in the satisfaction of having and being what you want. And if you can do that, my friend, life is yours. You are no longer standing in shallow water, but you will launch into the deep of life. I can testify to everything being said here, and so can the rest of our 100-country-plus community. And the truth is, if you take this seriously, if you truly choose to dive in, you will find that imagination truly does create reality.